Hi, this is Andrea Kane, and I'm here with you for HIT 210. We are still on week 4, but we're finishing it up with chapter 10 on disability. So if you want to turn in your book to page 189, that's where we'll get started. These are the objectives, and they're also at the top of page 189 in your book. It's to look at the history of disability, describe benefits and exclusions contained in individual and group disability income insurance, describe federal disability benefit programs, talk about the differences between SSDI and SSI, talk about state eligibility requirements, benefits, and limitations of SSDI and SSI, and then explain disability benefit programs for disabled active military personnel, veterans, and their dependents. Talk about states that have state disability insurance plans, state eligibility requirements, benefits, limitations of those state disability plans, and then talk about voluntary disability insurance plans. We'll briefly skim through the topics and contents of a medical report and guidelines for federal disability claims and state disability claims and forms that are used for processing state disability plans. So let's get started. Okay, disability income insurance. It provides benefits under certain conditions when the insured is unable to work as a result of illness, disease, or injury. It does not provide benefits if the insured is unable to work as a result of a work-related event, because that is workers' comp. So this is where it starts and ends. If it's a work-related event, it's workers' comp. But once it's determined to be a permanent disability and all the workers' comp benefits have been exhausted, then someone can apply for disability income insurance or disability income. So just know that if it's work-related, it starts out as workers' comp. It stays workers' comp until that is completely exhausted, and then it moves over into disability if someone applies and is approved for that, whether you're talking federal or state. Disability income policies started being utilized or offered in the 1880s, so they've been around a good long time. And in 1956, Congress extended Social Security to disabled adults over the age of 50. In 1965, it expanded Social Security benefits to disabled adults regardless of age. So you can see over time where that became, that aspect of Social Security became broader. When you talk about individual disability income insurance, it provides a specific income if you're disabled. The insured, the person who is insured pays the premiums. Their medical expenses are not covered. Disability must not be work-related, and the insured must meet specific policy criteria. An example of this for me happened when I had my kids. I had C-sections with both of mine, and my hospital that I worked for, my healthcare organization, because it was more than a hospital, they paid for long-term disability. But short-term disability was my responsibility, and I chose to carry that. And it paid about 65% of my salary during the time that I was off. My particular insurance stated that I had to use paid time off, my PTO, for the first 8 weeks. And then after that 8 weeks, for the last 4 weeks of my maternity leave, it would pay 65% of my income. And I was really blessed at the time because my healthcare organization paid my 8 weeks of PTO, and they made up the difference between that 65% to 100%. So I was really, really blessed in the organization that I worked for, that they had that policy. So I paid the premiums on the short-term disability, and that gave me an income during that time. And I was just, like I said, really, really blessed that they paid my PTO and they made up the other 35% of my income above and beyond the short-term disability. I have always advocated to everyone that I know to carry short-term disability, because if you don't until your long-term disability kicks in, which can often be 6 months, it can be incredibly financially hard. So having seen others who didn't carry it and how they struggled, I just, really encourage people to do that. So that's an example of when you would have individual income, disability income insurance. There is often a waiting period, which is the time from the beginning of the disability to the beginning of the first benefit payment. Like I said, for me with maternity, it was 8 weeks. I had to have 8 weeks before my short-term disability kicked in. For long-term disability, sometimes it's 6 months, or it could even be 12 months. The benefit period is is the maximum span of time that the benefit will be paid to the disabled party. So they'll tell you in your policy that they will only pay for a certain period of time or up to a certain amount of money, whether that is short-term disability or permanent disability, long-term. Benefits get paid if the disability is partial or limits the capacity to work full-time. There are specific provisions that may increase payments, and there's a special clause almost always that addresses accidents that result in death or permanent disability. There are 3 types of disability, and these dovetail really well with what we learned back in workers' comp. There is they don't have non-disabled, which is what the first level was in workers' comp. But they do have temporary disability, same as in workers' comp. This means that the person cannot perform all the normal work duties for a limited period of time. It's temporary. The new category here is partial disability, meaning that they cannot perform all their normal work duties. They can do some of them, but they can't do all of them. Even after a temporary period of time, they still can't do all of them. They can only do some. Then you have total disability, and that's the same thing as what you saw under workers' comp, that the person can no longer perform the normal work duties. They just can't do it. They're disabled beyond that ability anymore. So those are the types of disability that you're going to want to keep in mind. Clauses. Policies have clauses in them where they talk about there's a guaranteed renewal, or it's non-cancelable, or there's a waiver of premium. They have all these little caveats to say, well, this is, you got to keep this in mind, or that in mind, or this is covered, that's not covered. Exclusions. Sometimes with disability, they'll say pre-existing conditions. They may choose to not cover some mental health conditions or other specified disabilities. Because remember, they're talking about not work-related things. So, although once you get past, again, once you've exhausted workers' comp, you then are eligible for disability in many cases, most cases, I believe. With AIDS and HIV, if that's the disability or the condition that's causing a person to be unable to work, the patient, the individual has to give special consent and complete a form before those results can be released. Talking about group disability income, this is where employers offer group insurance as an optional benefit. And again, this is a really great thing. The contracts are between the insurer and the employer. So the employer is the one who's paying the premiums with or without employee contributions. The only downside to this is that the policy terminates when the employee leaves the company. So going back to my example, I had long-term disability insurance as long as I worked for that employer. When I moved from North Carolina to Iowa, I lost that insurance until I started with a new employer in Iowa, or was covered under my husband's policy. Disability benefit programs. There are several here. There's Social Security Disability Insurance, SSDI, and then there's Supplemental Security Income. Those two are probably the most common that you'll hear about. The rest are related to federal people, such as civil service, federal employees, armed services, and veterans. Social Security Disability Insurance, or SSDI, is a long-term plan. It provides benefits to workers and self-employed who meet eligibility criteria. This is federal. Insured may also be eligible for Medicare after 24 months, and it converts to retirement benefits at age 65. Because remember, this is money to live on. This is not medical insurance, it's money to live on, so to speak. Supplemental Security Income, SSI. This is a long-term disability program that provides benefits to adults and children regardless of employment history. Many of these individuals also qualify for Medicaid. Their benefits are intended for those with limited income and few other resources. So SSDI and SSI, they're different. They're both federal programs, but they target workers versus not necessarily workers. They kind of dovetail with Medicare and Medicaid, just as they said. And then it briefly touches on civil service retirement, armed services disability, and veterans. And so obviously if someone was a veteran, they would need to explore those through the VA. There is state disability insurance, but it only exists in 5 states. To fund the programs, a percentage of wages is deducted from paychecks or the employer pays the plan costs. Your eligibility ceases upon retirement. And I'm going to guess that your book is going to talk about what those states are. Let's see. Yes. If you will look at the bottom of page 195, there are the states that are included in this are California, Hawaii, New Jersey, New York, Puerto Rico, and Rhode Island. So since the odds are we aren't going to be interacting with any of those states, at present I'm going to skim through this information. But it's here on page 195 if you want to take a look at it. There are restrictions. And there are time limits. You can see that on page 196. All right, voluntary disability insurance. This is designed for people who reside and work in states without state disability insurance programs. There are local private insurance carriers that offer coverage, and if disabled, the insured receives fixed weekly or monthly income, usually for 6 months. Then we get to claim submission guidelines. And again, I'm going to skim over this because this is information that you would learn on the job if you're going to be doing billing. And it does give you a couple of examples of forms. Pages 198 and 199 give you an example of a claim for the state of New York. And of course, they're going to want the attending physician to complete the form. They're going to want some medical reports attached to it to submit to verify and explain the disability and the treatment. And then this is about federal disability claims. and VA. And then the state disability claims. It's all pretty much the same if you're going to process them. And then this just gives you some numbers and information. And that is it for chapter 10. You'll want to look at the key points on page 200 and make sure you know those. And that is all we have. Next week will be week 5, and we are going to go over chapter 11 together. And we'll have a discussion on documenters, release of information, and record retention. And then you will have a lecture on chapter 12. And I would, before you get to class, make sure you check the announcement about the coding sites and make sure you can get into both, because I'll go ahead and demonstrate those next week. All right, if you have any questions or concerns, you know where to find me. I hope you have a fabulous rest of your week. Take care and see you soon. Bye.